5 players to buy heading into week 8. First player I want to talk about is Kyren Williams. So the Rams do have a bye this week, so target a manager that may be struggling with buys, which is a very good possibility because there are a lot of teams on bye. We've got the Cardinals, Lions, Jags, Raiders, Rams, and Seahawks. With Kyren, he hasn't eclipsed 100 rush yards yet this season and still only has 2 touchdowns on the ground, but obviously is the clear lead back on a team that's firing on all cylinders, and Sean McVay obviously loves him. And in this last game in which they were killing Jacksonville, Blake Corum did have 12 carries, and that was the first time Corum has had over double-digit carries, but this was obviously a lopsided game, and 10 of those 12 carries were when the Rams were already up by more than 3 scores. So kind of use Corum's increased role as leverage to kind of say, hey, he's eating into the backfield. Some trade ideas that I would be looking to move, like maybe Jaylen Warren plus a receiver, or DeAndre Swift after 2 big games straight up. Someone like a J.K. Dobbins plus, a wide receiver 3, all kind of targets that I would be looking for to acquire Kyren, because I think he will be in for a big second half, and this team is scoring a ton of points, and he should see a positive regression for touchdowns on the ground. Second player I want to talk about is Rome Odunze. So back-to-back disappointing weeks for Rome, and there's a good chance the Rome manager is getting a little bit impatient after he started the season so hot. So they're already through their bye, which is kind of a nice bonus. And, looking at their schedule the next couple weeks, Baltimore, Cincinnati, in those games, the Ravens are going to get Lamar. Flacco has brought some life into the Bengals, so we could be looking at 2 potential shootouts here. And, everyone was kind of screaming touchdown regression was coming for Rome, and they were correct. But over the last 2 weeks, the only touchdown pass Caleb Williams has thrown was kind of that fluky one to DeAndre Swift a couple weeks ago. And this past week against the Saints, they handled that game on the ground. So it's not like the touchdowns have been, coming through the air and going to someone else on this team. With Rome, he's still out there on pretty much every play. He's still the top target earner, but whether or not he's tradable kind of depends on the other manager. Like if they're a Washington alum who took him 2 rounds above ADP and they were yapping all off season about the breakout, like maybe don't waste your breath. But, if the manager that has Rome just got like CD and or Rashee Rice back and they're loaded at the position and you have a surplus of running backs, it's definitely worth inquiring about. Some other trade ideas for Rome, maybe DeVonta Smith off a big game plus a bench wide receiver, Jordan Mason plus a wide receiver 3, Keenan Allen straight up after a big game. So definitely check in on Rome. Next player I want to talk about is Stefon Diggs. So his name value might make him a little bit tougher to trade for. And I get it if you want receivers on your team who are out there for more than 60% of the snaps, but he and Drake May have just been so efficient together. Of his 44 targets this season, they've connected on 39 of them. That's almost 90%. And, right now Diggs is right around the wide receiver 30 on the year. So don't overpay by any means, but, he was working his way and still is working his way back from an ACL injury that happened pretty much exactly a year ago. So there's a chance he gets more and more involved as the season goes along. And there's no denying the fact that he's looked really good so far. And, if we start to see some of Kayshon Boutte's touchdowns shift in the direction of Diggs, we could be looking at a plug and play wide receiver 2 for the back half of the season. And just a side note, obviously he had that great revenge game against the Bills. They do get the Bills again on week 15, which for most of you is the first round of the fantasy playoffs. So he could potentially go off in that one. Next player I would be trying to acquire is Jakobi Meyers. So if you've watched our channel throughout the offseason, you know that we were all over Meyers. He had been one of the most underrated fantasy assets over the last few seasons. The thought was he got an upgrade at quarterback, he got an upgrade at play caller, then he comes out week 1, gets 10 targets, 12 targets week 2. And it was just like, once the touchdowns start coming, is he going to finish top 15 this year? And then all of a sudden, unfortunately, things have kind of been crashing down. And I wanted to include him on here because before the season, he had requested a trade. And now we're seeing those trade rumors start to heat up. So ideally, at least for me, if he lands with the Giants and becomes Jackson Dart's number 1, there could be a ton of value in that. And, the Raiders do have a bye in week 8. So this is someone you should be able to buy kind of on the dirt cheap. And there's a chance in really shallow leagues, he might even be dropped in some places. But, if your league mate is super tuned in and expecting him to get traded, maybe it's, he's not super acquirable, but just inquire. There's also a chance that he gets traded to a team and his value kind of tanks, similarly to what we saw with Amari Cooper last year. But this is like a true buy low, like a Tony Pollard for Jakobi Meyers or someone along those types of swap, in case he lands with a good team, or in case the Raiders decide to keep him. They go back to the drawing board and, they just design their offense around he, Bowers, and Genty, and Geno wakes up, but we'll see. Again, this is a very, very buy low. Last player I want to talk about is George Kittle. So we were all excited about the return of Kittle, and hopefully that didn't cost you your matchup this week. A goose egg is just brutal, but he was out there on 81% of the snaps, and his presence was felt in a huge way. It's just not the way that we had hoped for going up against a good Falcons defense. And that was, of course, in the run blocking department, which is wildly underrated, or I'm not sure if you can call it that, but maybe to a casual fan, part of his game. And what do we see? CMC explodes on the ground, doubling his rushing total from any previous game. And, this was the first game that Kittle had played with Mac Jones, and hopefully it will be the last, because it sounds like Purdy should be back this week. There's no need to run through the stats and tell you what that connection is like between Kittle and Purdy. And, I know trading tight ends can be a little bit tricky, and, Kittle, you'll probably have to pay up for, even though he's coming off a bad game, but there's a chance that your Kittle manager in your league, is kind of hurting on the season. But I think if you're a strong team trying to accumulate elite pieces, this is a move I'd consider. You'd probably be able to do Tucker Kraft 1-for-1. I'm not sure if you'd want to do that. I probably still would. I would inquire about, like, if I had Jank Ferguson, maybe 1-for-1, or throw in a bench piece. Maybe offer Dalton Kincaid coming out of their bye plus a flex player, kind of something along those lines. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and look forward to talking to you in the next one.